Alright, we are recording for Chapter 9 of Star Trek The Search for Spock. In there. Do I like this chapter better than 8? I think so, yeah. I got less issues with it. That's certainly true. And there's some neat stuff in it, too. Some of it just neat on its own, some of it neat because of how it does expand on the movie. So, for example, this is near the beginning, first highlight. Sulu centered his attention on the impulse engines there on board the Enterprise. They had not, of course, received the overhaul Scott had wished to give them, and they responded hesitantly, irritably, erratically, just as they had on the way in. The warp drive would be equally rocky. It also seems odd to point out, because, technically, yeah, the overhaul hasn't been done. It's only been, 3 days. I mean, technically, I don't even think it's that long. It's probably more like 2 days, because of how short the... Okay, no, 2.5 days, start of the third day. Based on how quickly things seem to be happening with Grissom. But still, this is something, I don't recall it being clear in the movie that the Enterprise was in such poor condition during their escape. It seemed functional until they arrived, and the one hit from the bird of prey did so much damage to them and knocked out so much that it's really not until then that the damage to the Enterprise seemed to matter at all. Okay, so just trying to see where... As they are pulling out, they see the new ship, the Excelsior, there. And Sulu isn't having the easiest time with that, but he's doing what he's going to be doing. Okay, and they're having to, go towards the huge closed space doors. Which, by the way, one thing that occurred to me: are the ships wider or taller? Because the doors are shown opening this way, but it kind of seems like it should be this way. That the Enterprise is shorter than it is wide. But anyway, he heard the beginning of a command to secure them, the doors. A command that was abruptly and rudely cut off by a screech of static. A moment later, raucous voice spilled over the channel. Sulu recognized the voice of a popular comedian. He grinned. Everything Uhura did, she did with flair and humor. Crossing Starfleet channels with those of a system-wide entertainment network might well produce an interesting hybrid. It's like, I really like this. See, this is what... How could Heisenberg have said some of the stuff to her? I mean, it's like, look at how famous they are. It's like, dude, she is as famous, and she deserves it. Oh, man. All right. It's just, that's classy as well. It's just classy. It really is. You yeah, I'm going to start crossing the lines here. And it's also helpful because in theory, that's something I could see happening by accident. So, yes, what she is doing is sabotage. But technically, it might... There is some... not reasonable doubt, crap. Plausible deniability, essentially. Some plausible deniability there. Not much, but, a little bit. And it's funny. It is also mentioned... Yeah, we do get this. What the hell do you mean yellow alert? How can you have a yellow alert in space dock? We do get that line in there before it's cut off. But it is mentioned the whole... What she is doing is going to stop anything from happening outside of space dock. But in space dock, they can see... Why is the Enterprise floating by? Isn't it supposed to be over there, ready to be decommissioned? And so it's like that they can't avoid. But that means then that just the Excelsior is an issue. Which actually isn't true. Because what did we count? That there should be 9 ships in space dock? Because what did it say? 2 being repaired. Well, 2 under construction, 1 would be the Excelsior. 2 under repair. 2 being prepared for decommissioning. What was it? Because there were 4 different things where it always was saying ships doing this, ships doing that. So a minimum of 2 each, and there were 4, and the Enterprise coming in made 9. Now, I'm good with the idea of just, well, Excelsior is the only one that is in a state that it can go out. But that also makes space dock really dumb. because you'd think it would just always have a ship there ready to go out. Because in theory, you might need to evacuate the space dock, and that would be a way to do it. So you'd want a starship nearby at all times. Why not inside of it then? It could be an older ship. It doesn't need to be very powerful, but yeah, something. Anyhow. Okay. So they get the door open, which is less tense in the book, which I get the whole... You could have had more of the, and now, Scotty, I am working on it. Now, Scott, that's in the movie. It's not in here. Just, it's like you can open them anytime now. Well, it says, open them. It's like, yeah, I'm working. Okay, now they're open. But anyway, so Excelsior's gonna start following them. Yeah, there's the whole Kirk. You do this and you'll never sit in Captain's chair again. Comment from Captain Styles when he gets in, hails the Enterprise and is coming over the communications. But they enter warp, so Excelsior's communications switch to subspace. No way, Kirk, Styles said. We'll meet you coming back. Prepare for warp speed. Stand by transwarp drive. Damned show-offs, Sulu thought. Excelsior could catch the Enterprise with warp speed alone. With transwarp, it would overshoot its quarry and indeed have to come back to meet it. Yeah, but we do get Excelsior is adrift in space, but there's also a little bit more because Scotty sabotage, which kind of sort of gets explained later. Not great, but we cut back to Uhura. When Captain Styles' call for a tow came through from Excelsior, Uhura intercepted and damped it, feeling considerable satisfaction. Take over Hikaru's ship, will you? She thought. You can just sit there and stew for a while. It's like, yeah, I like Uhura. I mean, she deserves it. Okay, she deserves to be given time like this. I get she doesn't. You can't necessarily make her one of the main characters, but yes, yes, she is. She deserves her good moments. Well, she deserves her moments, which should always be good because Uhura is a good character. So it's like, I like this. I like this. And then she's leaving Heisenberg in the closet, by the way, and she's even thinking through as, yeah, maybe he would help, because he is like, if you just tell me what's going on, maybe. But she's like, yeah, and he might like the adventure for a while, but then he'd probably regret it. And it's also, as long as I leave him in there, and somebody else finds him, it's clear he had nothing to do with this, so he won't be court-martialed. So she's doing that to protect him. Sets the transporter on automatic and beams out. We'll come back to where she is in a moment. But then we get to, what did Scotty do? I took it out of Excelsior's main transwarp computer. I knew Styles surely wouldn't be able to resist trying it out, the computer chip he had ripped out. Which I like better what's in the movie, especially because it's more like marbles, and it's just going 1, 2, 3. He's just dropping them out because it's like, they keep coming. But I do. It's also neat. That Scotty, in theory, has only known Styles not even a full day. That he was on the Excelsior doing this stuff, and had encountered Styles for however much that was, and he was like, "This man is he's going to try to show off like that." So that's all I have to disable. Why disabling the transwarp computer knocks out the rest of the computers such that the whole thing stalls, and he can't just go to warp, I don't know. But yeah. Although I will say this, it would have been interesting if it was Excelsior managed to get the warp drive going again after a few hours and then took off after them, and so actually arrives in time to see Genesis. Like, it would be interesting to have them as a witness and somehow react. Somehow do something. It would be interesting, but the problem is, how could you get away? Well, actually, no, you could do that. If they get there, see Genesis exploding, or shortly before that, and the bird of prey. But let it be the bird of prey has been taken over, and so the Enterprise crew cloaks it. The Excelsior sees it and it's like, what? Where is Grissom? Why is Grissom not here? Why is there a bird of prey? There was a bird of prey. We don't know what's up with the bird of prey. And the planet just exploded. What the hell is going on? That actually could have been helpful. Because then it's also setting up that there's an issue with the Klingons now. That the Federation has to deal with. Because it's like, okay, Genesis is apparently a failure, but Klingons, why were you here? What do you mean? We weren't there. Yeah, you were. I mean, since it and then that could help feed into, with Voyage Home, the trial. Because it's like, the Excelsior has evidence there now. I'd say that actually would have been interesting. And potentially help give us that it's not just somehow the transwarp computer took out the whole of the Excelsior. So yeah, that could have worked. But I do also understand the whole, nope, we wanted it completely off the board. I got that. It's just, you could have had more. And that's another thing, because what does Scotty actually say in the movie? It might have been I took these out of the transwarp computer, but it still is, because of the multiple pieces. Because in this, it actually does say it's the... Hang on. Okay, no, I guess not. I'm misremembering. I thought he said specifically what it was. No, just that it's out of the transwarp the main transwarp computer. Which is again thing. There could have been a backup. But there is also a small mention in here that I appreciate. The idea that Scotty was careful with this, that the damage would not be permanent. And that was a sort of gift to Sulu, because Sulu still cares about the ship, and so it's like, okay, good, we'll still be able to go out there and do things. Okay, so now we get back to Uhura, who she beamed herself just outside of the Vulcan embassy. She couldn't beam herself inside; it's jammed for a good reason. And she's like, "Can you let me in?" And it's like, "It's late. No, I mean, but it's an emergency. Come back in the. I mean, I'm giving them emotion because there's even a comment in here from Uhura that it's like I'm talking with a machine. Might even be, yeah, and a machine with poor standards, so poor ability to speak, which is actually shocking when you think about it. You would make sure that any employee at an embassy speaks the language of wherever they are. Anyhow. But, you know, she's like, no, I have to get in here. It's like, why? I can't tell you. It's private. Oh, yeah, sure. That's a good way to convince us to open the door. But she's finally like, tell Sarek that Commander Uhura is here and it concerns Genesis. Why Genesis? I don't know. It would have made more sense to say concerns his son. But anyway, finally the gate opens up, but security is right behind her because she knew once they got into the transporter room, they would see where she'd beamed to and follow. And she sprints out for the 100 meters, gets right up by the residence, but that's when they catch her. They grab her and start pulling her back. I'll come with you if you'll just give me 10 minutes to speak with Ambassador Sarek. It's desperately important. I'm sorry, that's impossible. It's directly against orders. So they are just removing her and say, nope, you're just caught. Do your orders include invading the sovereign territory of an allied power? They hadn't realized Sarek had gotten up and was walking quickly but quietly after them. And it's like, oh shit. Because that is completely true. They are not allowed to arrest her there. Which is also interesting for another reason. But, I mean, that was not an intention. Yeah, we're trying to get them to treatment, the Enterprise bridge crew, because they're just like, oh yeah, they've all gone nuts. That's what we're trying to do. I will do no such thing. You know, turning of Commander Her. Commander Her has requested political asylum, and I have granted it. I give you leave to remove yourselves from the embassy grounds. Commander, is this what you want? It could mean exile, but we might all be able to get out of this pretty clean. If I give you your 10 minutes off the record, will you come with us? And she thinks about it, but it's like, but she'd burned too many bridges. No, I'm staying here. So good move on her part. I mean, it's like that's what she needs to do. But one thing, that's right. It is interesting, the sovereign territory aspect here, because I'm trying to think my best to put this. It is easy to forget that the Federation, I mean, even the word Federation implies that they're not a homogenous group. I mean, it's like how the United States, I mean, there's the Federalist and Anti-Federalist aspects to it, but it is a federation as well, in that every state, I mean, it's one of those things that in the United States, we do kind of neglect this. We do kind of forget about this. That the term state should be like a nation state. Like Great Britain is a state. Germany is a state. France is a state. How is Ohio a state equal to them? In some ways, it's not. In other ways, it is. Because of the level of self-governance that we do have. Also scale, but that's something a little different. And I wonder, because now I'm just thinking with Canada, you have provinces, but a province is different than a state. So would Canada technically not be a federation then? It is just a nation with these areas, these provinces. That is possible. I don't know. But it still is the Federation, the United Federation of Planets. Vulcan would be a separate sovereignty to Earth, and so would need to have an embassy that is there. It's not just a Sarek is not just a representative to give the voice for the Vulcan people in the Federation. No, he is in fact a diplomat on Earth that is away from his home. It is separate, and it is an interesting concept because it's very rarely, if ever, really depicted in Star Trek that I can recall, because it's all very Earth-centric, which makes sense because the main cast is usually always human. I mean, think about it, with the original series, Spock is the only exception. With TNG, Worf and Deanna, although Deanna's half human, but the main cast, and we're setting Data aside, it's really just those two. And by the way, canonically, it's stated in Deep Space Nine that Beta Z is actually near Earth. Which is one of those funny things, because technically they should be. It's one of those things for why I hate Star Trek Enterprise. It's like, why didn't we meet Beta Z? The Betazoids. Technically they should have. I don't recall them ever doing so, but they are, because they are one of the nearest worlds. And it's like, why don't you do that? You don't need makeup except for the eye things, which I honestly never noticed this growing up. But apparently Marina Sirtis, Circus? Is it a T or a K? I don't remember now. Sorry, forgive me. She had to wear contact lenses that gave her just no iris. It was all black there. It's like, I never noticed that before. And I feel kind of bad about that, because it's one of those things that if I would ever meet her, because I liked her character in there. I liked Deanna. She did a good job in it. And I also, let me see, I know she did one episode of Stargate SG-1. What else? I feel like I know something else that she had done. But regardless, I liked Deanna Troi. She did a good job. But there'd be that part of me that'd be like, I hope those contacts weren't a problem for you, because I never even noticed them. I mean, true, I was growing up in the 90s, but it's like, I never noticed them, and it's like, I really hope that they weren't annoying, because they would have been a waste on me. I'm sorry. But yeah, so it is just interesting that the Federation in certain ways seems like it should be closer in design to the United States. but in reality, it shouldn't be, and the whole there being the embassy here kind of depicts that. Because let me put it another way: Ohio does not have an embassy with Illinois, nor vice versa. We don't need that because it's even though we are separate states, we are part of the Federation, and we would communicate by other means. But this does show by there being Vulcan is a separate sovereign power within the Federation. It's an ally, but it's still separate. It makes it quite different. And I'm just now kind of pondering on how many ways might that change things, or what stories could you see enabled for that? Yeah, I can see. Oh man, that would have been good. But they didn't do Enterprise well. I'm sorry, I really, really got issues with Star Trek Enterprise. One that I kind of teased on before, but then completely neglected to continue on. With the whole Sarek clearly is actually racist, how I was talking about that. With how he was like, Kirk, it would take too long for you to learn everything to even be able to ask simple questions, so you just ask hard questions. It's like, you say that about all humans. No, Amanda has put all the work in. Of course, she is special. It's like, this is a racist comment. But it's still, the way he's racist is consistent with the behavior of Vulcans prior to that and following until Enterprise, where they're just shown as completely hypocritical political beings that there's no way in hell this is actually consistent with Vulcan logic as has been depicted for the decades prior to that show coming on the air. So it's one of the reasons I really hate that show, that they do damage to the Vulcans there. So and I also despise the Temple Cold War. I see that as just, hey, it's a prequel. That means we can't do really advanced technology. Oh shit, we should never have made it a prequel then. It's that's kind of how I see it. And there's also other issues with being a Temple Cold War, because technically that makes it eternal, which means it should have been present and other things. At minimum, you'd have issues with the Prophets in Deep Space Nine, because they should have been aware. I mean, everything else you might be like, well, it never came up for these other. The Prophets would have known. Prophets would have been involved in it, you'd think. So, I mean, it just... So many problems. So many problems. So, to me, I just would say, no, they should have just made it more so about the Enterprise being the Earth's first Warp 5 ship, has duties with trying to help set up new colonies, while also, like, staying nearby so they can... If there's a problem, they can get back, but also having to explore out. It's like, that would have been interesting. And you could still have great stakes set up there. I think that's also part of the reason with the Temple Cold War, is they wanted to be able to have bigger stakes than what you had before. It's like, no, the stakes are relevant to only what you're doing now. You don't need to grow the stakes based on previous material, because the stakes aren't set by previous material. They're set by what you're doing now, unless you have a large arc going across. They didn't. There were no large arcs going from TOS to TNG to Deep Space Nine to Voyager. Weren't doing that, so yeah, there was no need to have to try to increase stakes for Enterprise. But the thought that just occurred to me is, imagine having it where they're helping set up those colonies, and some are like, yes, we are a colony of Earth. We respond to Earth. We answer to Earth. But imagine another being like, you know what? We don't want to. We want to be a new power on our own. It's like, we want our independence from Earth. We'll be your ally, but we want independence. And imagine doing that, and then other Earth colonies, because in theory there are others, also being like, hey, you know what? We want to secede in the same way. We want our independence as well. That actually would have been very interesting to do. I don't recall them doing that. There would also be an element of what would the Enterprise do? Because it might be it's a warship as well. It needs to go and deal with this, but at the same time, if it's doing that, it's neglecting serving these other colonies that are staying connected. So it's like, that would have given greater stakes. It would have been quite interesting. But they didn't do it. And it also would have helped set up how there are dynamics within the Federation. It is not, as I said, homogenous. Anyway. I need to check in this. Okay, it is a little later. I am liking Krug better. He's growing. Because as I had said in one of the previous things, we're definitely getting culture with it, Klingon culture with him. That, like the whole killing the gunner. The gunner, he killed the gunner in response to the gunner not taking his own life as he was supposed to. That would be the proper way, the honorable way for him to, regain his honor. But instead, no, he was a coward, and so coming at Krug shot and killed him. It's like, that's not as cold-blooded, and it's just Krug is a paragon of his culture, at least at this time. Klingon culture, I think you can say, does change over time, but it's like, from this story to other stories, but it's like, that is actually much more interesting. He's not a bad guy, he's just his culture. We also get that here, because he beamed down not where the high order life signs, where the humans are, which is also interesting. He's only referring to them as high order, which again may make sense as his own racism. That's like, no, I do not consider humans and Vulcans or Romulans to be, above animals per se, but they are high order life signs. I could see that as well, because it is legitimately only here they're referred to as high order. Anyhow, instead he beams down near enough to track them, and he intends to track them, but he beams down near the coffin, near the torpedo tube, because he wants to start tracking there, because they started off here. There are some weird animal signs here. Let's go investigate. Krug pulled out his tricorder and scanned with it. He located the metallic mass around which so much activity had lately centered. It lay deeper in the glade, perhaps 50 paces. Some minor life signs surrounded it, but the signs lacked the high order that would betray the presence of the prisoners he hoped to take. Still, they had been there, so he would go there too to pick up their trail. So he is hunting them. Which makes sense, because that would be part of his culture. That no, it's not enough that I can just beam down right next to them and take them, and he should also be able to just beam them right up. No, he wants to hunt them. He needs to earn capturing them. Arriving at it, which by the way, he walks up and his guards, when seeing it, the heck, and they stop. Even his dog actually stops. But he continues forward. All around its base, like the monsters in the story of Nagarakani, probably mispronouncing it, but a myth of Krug's people, writhed a great mass of sleek, scaled creatures. So this is what the worms have evolved into. But then, like the hero of Nagarakani, he would wrestle with the demons and defeat them. So his approach to these is also out of his culture. He's doing this because, yes, there's a Klingon story that seems so similar to this. And indeed, there was one that seems to be stronger. It's on top of the tube, has come over, and it is specifically challenging him, and he grabs it by the neck, and it starts wrapping around him, and it actually comes really close to killing him as it wraps around his neck and is crushing it there. And then he realizes the creature had tricked him into going on the defensive. He let its body tighten around him. He turned to the attack. He gripped its throat with both hands and squeezed. He began to twist. He heard its bones begin to crunch. As he began to lose consciousness, its strength suddenly dissipated and it sagged away from him. So then he just threw it away. His subordinates gazed upon him with awe. He intensified their reaction by ignoring it. It's like, dude, this guy is actually really neat. Because again, he is like the epitome of his culture. They all are recognizing this is like something out of this myth, and he is stepping forward and becoming the hero of the myth. It's really neat because Not to say he isn't the bad guy here, and maybe it will develop to where he is truly being the bad guy. But here, you could make the argument he's legitimately doing things to protect Klingon culture. He is concerned that Genesis could be used as a weapon against his culture, so he has come to investigate it. Yes, his methods do include death. But it's not that it's his methods, it's that it's his culture's methods. I really like that. I really appreciate it. And it just... I do wonder how some things will be told in the story later concerning him. I'm just trying to think. Is anything else? Nothing. No, not with that. Just the... Yeah, I do... It's kind of a twist in a way. Like with... If you go back to the videos I did for Return of the Jedi, I don't remember which chapter would have been. Probably 6? When the heroes are trying to convince the Ewoks to join and help them, to join them in the war effort against the Empire. And how I still remember I'm reading that, and I'm even making the note about how Han and Luke trying to convince them that he's not appreciating Ewok culture at all. Well, neither of them are, I should say. Yeah, and so they're not connecting at all. Leia says her thing, do it for the trees, which she just was using the Force to basically connect with them and could sense it then. It's like, and I still remember reading it and being like, yes, this makes sense because the trees will be of importance to the Ewoks. She's speaking to the culture. And then we get Wicked's speech, and it's like, yes, this is perfect because it's about the culture there. I'm learning about the Ewok culture in that speech. It's great. Now, in that case, it was in a positive way because Ewok is a positive character, is a good motivated character with good motivations. He's a good guy. Krug, from our perspective, is a bad guy, but he is following his culture, and we're learning more about his culture by his actions. It's really awesome. So yes, I like that. It is a flip on it, Wicked and the Ewoks, but it is still kind of the same thing, and it's very valuable, I feel, to do that. I will add, and I think I've talked about this before, there is the idea of one culture being better than another, but there is still reason to try to appreciate cultures, even if it also seems reasonable to destroy them. Alright, and I do have a story where that kind of stuff, well, a story idea where that kind of stuff will be going on. Anyhow, now we get back to David and Saavik. Almost said Saavik, no, David and Saavik. So they've been looking at these things, and we're getting a better explanation for what is going on. Evolution was running wild. Each species was growing and changing, and aiming for its own extinction without creating any diversity, any new forms to take over when the old died out. Not that it mattered much. If his estimates were right, the evolutionary process would be only about half done when the more violent geological processes tore the whole planet apart. Soon after that, the subatomic attractions would break down, and the entire mass of what had been the Mutaran Nebula, what had been Genesis and the new star system, would degenerate into a homogeneous gaseous blob, a fiery structureless plasma, protomatter. So a few thoughts on that. One is, okay, now we're getting an explanation for protomatter, which I guess it's supposed to be the stuff that matter would evolve from. One problem with that is, as I recall for the Big Bang Theory, which granted, this is not necessarily what they were thinking in the 80s, but that soup, it cooled into what we know as normal matter, and technically antimatter, but not relevant right here. It cooled into that. Heat dissipated because it spread out, so less energy and low energy density things cooled off, and also pressure reduced, and that allowed particles to start forming. Even if this stuff is turning into protomatter, it would then go right back into being normal matter. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, how is it actually a truly unstable thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I do not know. But I will say this idea that the species are evolving very rapidly, which technically it does make sense because it has to be multiple generations going on there because of how evolution works. But let's set that aside for the moment and just, suspension of disbelief on that. But it is just they're evolving so rapidly that they're not achieving diversity. Which makes sense. The evolution is happening so rapidly that you're not seeing it adapting to its environment because it's always the environment doesn't change much over the course of 24 hours. So how can you evolve? So rapid evolution within those 24 hours doesn't mean that there's adaptation to the environment, nor adaptation to the things around you, like the other species around you, such as the plant life. So you may imagine you're in a location where there's blueberries here and further away red berries. If you're only in this one location with the blueberries, you will likely evolve to be able to digest the blueberries. But if your evolution is very rapid right there, you will only evolve to eat the blueberries. But if you then go out because the blueberries are gone and the red berries are there, well, you've not been going out and back and forth, so you're not encountering those red berries such that you can evolve to digest them as well. So you do. That may be a poor explanation of what I'm trying to get to here, but it is just this interesting concept that rapid evolution without exploration, so no adaptation, no pressure to adapt, and no competition, yeah, it makes sense that this would actually lead to problems. And actually made me wonder then about artificial intelligence today, or machine learning today, which it is not. They are not alive by any definition. They are also not intelligent by most definitions either. Because, all those things do is they try to observe patterns and then try to match a pattern to whatever's being asked of it. And then just, okay, this pattern is nearest, so because in the pattern A and B just happened, I should say C. Then I should respond with C. That's really all they're trying to do. Or instead of it being 1, 2, 3, instead of being 1, 2, so 3 must be next, it might be a 1 and 2, so between them is 1.5. It's both interpolation and interpolation and extrapolation. Sorry, I was trying to go to intra and inter. No, it's inter and exa. But anyway, it's all based on models. And I feel like I once heard somebody describe it as AI is cynical. It's like, yes, that's actually perfect. Where it assigns values to these things and then it's just like, oh, well, in this circumstance, these are the values. So these are of the greatest value there, so I should follow that. But it's not necessarily true meaning of the things there. And also certainly not going to be any true creativity. It is still estimating because everything is based on estimations of what already exists. However, I do want to add this, and I know it's a hell of an aside, with people trying to claim things like it is theft of intellectual property, to like have AI look at paintings and then can recreate the style of the paintings. Like, oh, that's theft of it. Bullshit. Because something that it used to be art students would actually do is go to museums, set up an easel in front of these paintings, and try to recreate them. Like that legitimately was part of how you learned to paint, learned about these other styles, was having it there and trying to remake it yourself. It's legitimately not that different. Now, I don't know, maybe they stopped doing that, but it still is. You tend not to just start painting or producing any artwork without having some reference that you learn from. It's kind of the same thing. So unless you're going to argue that, well, that's also IP theft, which would be foolish because then that's a lot of artists that are also guilty of it. But anyway, I do wonder if this concept of rapid evolution without this adaptation, without this diversification may actually apply there. because a lot of technologies, evolution ideally will lead to diversity, because it tries for various solutions. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, and some of them are neutral, but it's neither here nor there. Like, does my hair color give me an advantage to survive or not? Probably not. It would be neutral. It doesn't hurt me, doesn't help me, doesn't hurt me. Supposedly my eye color does. Being brown, I can withstand bright lights better. It's like, yeah, I keep being told that. I think it's not true, though, because I also have very good low light sensitivity, so I just have good eyes, except for needing glasses. But yeah, I do. With technology, a lot of times it is we end up going towards one solution that. Well, no, that actually is exactly what happens. That tends to go towards one solution, and other solutions don't actually compete with that. It instead carves out its own thing. So one easy example would be like the ARM CPUs in our phones versus x86. And I remember even when I was in middle school, so we are talking the early 2000s, people were speculating that ARM would replace x86. That has not happened. And let me tell you something, it's not going to happen. They satisfy different purposes. And so it's not that, oh, here's x86, it got to the peak and we're just continuing to develop that. And now ARM has come up and is going to compete with, nope, it's over here. It's just staying on its track. And by the way, part of the reason why people were saying that back then was because you were seeing... No, we got rid of it. I actually used to have a Droid Incredible, which... Oh, crap, I don't remember the name of it, but it actually had the first ARM CPU in there to crack 1 gigahertz. And people were thinking that, oh man, that I didn't get that until later, but it was things like ARM finally hitting these frequency targets, finally, getting dual core, quad core, and so on. And people look at them and be like, oh, look, it's doing this so much faster than x86 was. It's clearly going to overtake. It's like, except it has the benefit of everything x86 had already achieved. It's like it was catching up to x86, benefiting from the knowledge of x86. It wasn't actually surpassing x86. But still is, as they're different things. They are these very evolved, but technically with little diversification there. I mean, it also is in many ways a lot diversification, but it's more like multiple adaptations within one thing, so there isn't really that much diversity. And I could believe that AI is actually going to do something similar, where it's just going to rapidly develop. It's going to become broad, but that's not diverse. Broad is not diverse in this case. And I do wonder if that could end up happening to it. That then it will just have something else come up that doesn't actually compete with it, is its own thing, but does exist there. And also could it then lead to issues with AI not being able to achieve other things because the basis to it is wrong, but was stuck on that one thing. I'll also add, because another way to potentially describe it besides x86 and ARM would be, for example, internal combustion engines and electric, gas-powered cars and electric cars. These are very different machines. Okay, I'll just leave that. It went to sleep, so. Yeah, they are very different machines. But the reality is, and I think a lot of people don't want to acknowledge this, is they technically aren't competitors. That where their separate strengths are is so separate, is so distinct, they're not competitors when you're actually talking about what one's advantage is to another. Gasoline engines can have far greater range because the energy density of gasoline is far, far greater than that of batteries. I mean, it's now true. It's been quite a while since this, but I remember one review that I had seen talking about, I think it was the original Tesla Roadster, where somebody hooked up a boat to it and saw how well they could haul that. And they were talking about how it was great because electric motors are perfect for low-end torque. So at low speeds, they've got a lot of power, a lot of hauling capacity. So that's in some ways better than his truck, which was gasoline powered, and those tend to have high-end torque. So at higher speed, they got better hauling capacity. The problem is that the Tesla, the batteries died in like half an hour, 45 minutes. Whereas the truck would be able to keep going for hours. And also there's the advantage of you refuel a truck in a few minutes, whereas an electric car takes a lot longer. So it's like, okay, the truck has the advantage there of greater range and greater ability to refuel, far faster, much faster refueling. Electric vehicles aren't going to be able to compete with that. But that's fine, because in some cases their uses make perfect sense. Like if you just need the car for going around town, getting you to work, back home, getting you to the grocery store and back, things like that, electric vehicles are probably perfectly fine. And we have 2 cars, but one of them, yeah, I mean, in theory we could do that. The thing is, I also grew up, we regularly were making 2 trips a year that would be 500 miles out. Yeah, couldn't do that with an electric car. Not easily. Because that would be 200 miles, 250 miles. Then we'd have to stop and recharge for hours and then do it again. So it's basically, it'd force it to be 2 days. And we were originally doing those trips in 1 day. Not the most fun, but yeah. So it is just, they are different. And I'll bet that what will likely end up happening, short of government mandate kind of nonsense, that you will just see them both existing. Both technologies coexisting with them carved out in their niches. And that will be diverse. That would be its kind of diversity. But it's not that it evolved and produced diversity. It's that, no, you had 2 different technologies, 2 different species that developed and are going there. But they're not technically from the same root. Here, it's one root going up, no diversity. In nature with species, it should be one thing that goes out in many cases. Some die out, some don't. They succeed and you get the diversity. Again, with technology, that's not how it is. It seems more like, nope, this comes up and then this comes up. They might look similar, but they are very, very different. Let's see if I can actually focus on the story now. Why are you talking to him in Vulcan? So we're back to Saavik and David. Saavik shrugged. I know it is not logical. I know he cannot understand. But he would not understand any other language either. And Vulcan is the first language Spock taught me. David glanced at the child. It's hard to think of him as Spock, he said. He is only a part of Spock. He is the physical part. The mind exists only in potential. He might perhaps become a reasoning being with time and teaching. He is not so different from what I was when he found me. A scavenger, illiterate, certainly, almost completely inarticulate. Again, this is book Saavik here, where there is care here, there is emotion here, and she is returning to Spock what Spock had given her. And it's like, she even says, I know it's not logical to speak to him in Vulcan, because there's no reason there's no reason to believe he will understand it. But it still is. That is what he taught me. That was the first language he taught me, so that's what I'm going to use here. It's like it. Moving on. An hour before, the child had had the appearance of a boy of 8 or 10. Now he looked more like 13 or 14 years old. The child and the world are joined together, Saavik said. David hadn't observed these changes, so that he's looking and it's like, what? Saavik had been noticing. Unfortunately, there's no explanation for why this is happening, why they are linked, but, yeah, it's happening. I think it's not unreasonable that he did, in fact, the Genesis wave did decompose him and then recomposed him on the planet and just made him young for whatever reason, but that produced the link. I'm good with that as an explanation. That's my headcanon. That's not in the book, at least not so far. And we may get a different explanation. Okay. So, Tricorder goes off telling them that that something is approaching. So Saavik stood up. I will go. No, David said sharply. I'll do it. Give me your phaser. Saavik did not want David, untrained as he was, to go out alone on a spy mission. She glanced at the Vulcan boy. She did not want to leave him alone either, and she particularly did not want to leave David alone with him. I'll get to why. she realized it would be marginally less dangerous for David if he were to go spying on the unknown entity. And she could see that his guilt impelled him to undertake the mission. She offered him the phaser. And that's just by way of ends. I think there's a few lines left. Might be able to get this under an hour. So the reason, in theory, why it would be dangerous for David to remain is she accidentally let slip, meaning with getting a setup here, that it's in there, though. It's in the story naturally. That he is approaching the age of Pon farr. And it's like, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Because if David is there, and if Spock does go through it, it's not unreasonable that with how things are going, it might not happen. But it's still, if that were the case, Spock's reaction would be like, in Amok Time, I gotta kill somebody. Ends up being Kirk. In this, his attention would be on David, who very much would not have a chance, because he is not only just a human, and therefore weaker, he's also not physically trained for combat. Kirk had other things going against him, but it's still, in theory, Kirk can fight. David, no. So that's why. And she is like, when she mentioned the Vulcan blood burning, and Dave was like, huh? And she's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said anything. Fortunately, that's when the tricorder goes off, so she doesn't have to explain. But yeah, it's... That scene is going to be interesting to get more of Book Savik's reasoning involved with it and feelings about it. Because in the movie, it's easy enough to just see, because in the movie, Savik is just Vulcan, it's just logical. It's like, this is something he's going through, have to deal with this. And it can be left as cold as that. Whereas in the book Savik has far more emotions. There might be more meaning to it for her, both positive in a kind of love for Spock, but also she could see that as a betrayal of David and their relationship, as well as a betrayal of Spock as well. That is not how she views him, not the relationship that should exist there between them, but still the recognition of necessity. And that forgiveness will be possible, but she wishes the situation were different. I could believe that's how it may be described, and we'll find out. Crap. Oh yeah, that's right. One other thing with the whole Pon farr situation is like, he technically should be going through it multiple times, though. Because it's like he's approaching the age of when it first happened, and it's supposed to be then every 7 years in the adult. Hang on, does it actually say? Let me check one thing. It does say adult. I need to check one other thing. That's right, that's right. Okay. To free Vulcan men of the loss of emotional and physical control they endure every 7th year of their adult lives. I recently watched the episode The Cloudminders, where, and it's even pointed out as an issue, why is Spock just talking about Pon farr with a woman he just met? It's like, it does seem very odd. But then it's also, they try to talk about the Stratos inhabitants, which she is one of. Droxanne? Don't quite remember, but anyway. That it's mentioned that they are at an intellectual level similar to Vulcans. It's like, really? Why? Why do we believe that? You're saying that, but why do we believe that? Anyway, maybe that makes them more comfortable talking about it. But in any case, it is mentioned that it's for the species. However, in Amok Time, no, it's just the males. And even here, it is saying, no, it's the men. It's just the men. Which I think makes the most sense. Because you couldn't explain it another way, what happens in Amok Time, if what's-her-name was also going through it. It doesn't seem to make as much sense. So it being just the men makes sense. But then I think they do put it into Enterprise, but it's like I've already said, I don't like how Enterprise goes. Yeah, because it's also like how they try to have it that the mind meld was a forbidden technique, and that also only certain Vulcans are capable of it. It's like, yeah, none of that exists anywhere else. And hell, the whole thing with the Katra, it's like, and the halls of ancient wisdom, it's like that's all going to be based on touching people's minds and all that. It's like it has to be part of it. Also, in the motion picture with Kolinar, he was to get, if he had succeeded at it, he would have undergone a mind meld with the master there to confirm it, but also to then like finish the ritual and bring him into being a Kolinar master as well. So it's like mind melds are part of that tradition, which is ancient. I don't like Enterprise. It damages the Vulcans. It's also inconsistent with other things. Alright. Yeah. I'm going to be able to keep it under an hour. Yay! By the way, I did quickly look at the novelization for Final Frontier. It looked like at least some of the chapters are not as long, so hopefully that will mean that the videos will be not as long, which will be very helpful. I got to get through Voyage Home before that, but it still will be helpful to give me more time to work on various things, including my own writing that I'm kind of having to neglect that. Sucks, but it's what happens. This is a bit more time sensitive than that. Anyway, I'm coming up with ways to manage my time better that helps. So anyhow, see you next time.